Friends, our story begins late at night, in the middle of an obscure forest where some pretty scary things have started to happen. Suddenly, a violent explosion is emitted, after which a monster immediately flew into battle, destroying everything in its path and wanted to do the same to the small-bodied boy. He deftly jumped on his back and deftly handled him, despite his appearance, which turned out to be deceptive. At the moment of the fight, he paused only a few seconds to think and fix his hair, after which he immediately charged the monster with arrows from his bow. It immediately fell to the ground and was defeated. After the victory, there was a blue glow in the sky that came straight from the sun. It was they who helped us to spectacularly present this hero, which became Archer IAN. It was the little guy who was the archer. At this time, he was receiving his reward for being able to destroy the ogre. He decided that when he got about 100,000 gold, then he would take a break for himself. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed sharply and became wary, and near the archer, a smokescreen suddenly formed, behind which he saw absolutely nothing but approaching red eyes and a dark silhouette that was several times his size. It turned out to be a monster, at once with two heads, who laughed, feeling his advantage, for his mace alone was several times the size of the little archer. Archer was frightened out of his wits, and at that moment, a sharp blow from the mace flew at him, making him jump several meters. He is glad that he was able to save himself, because it is all thanks to the fact that he has the haste skill. But, unfortunately, the system tells him that he has only 1 minute left to use this skill, after which he will have a hard time. This makes Archer a little worried and realizes that he has to deal with a huge monster in 1 minute. And all this happens at a time when the monster is attacking him in parallel. As he revisits the system once more, the monster begins to fly as hard as he can into battle, at which point he casually discovers that he has only 1 trap left in reserve, and realizes that he will not get a second chance again. He was angry and starts screaming and calling for the monsters here. The most important task for him is to get the timing right, because if he makes a mistake, even for 1 second, he's finished. At this point, the ogre was as close as possible, and the archer was at maximum concentration and jumped sharply as soon as he approached him at the right distance. At that moment, he had time to set his traps, which, fortunately, the monster stepped into. It will slow him down and immediately stun him for a few seconds, after which the target becomes much more vulnerable. At this moment, is glad to be caught in his trap, and without wasting a minute, loads his bow and begins to shoot, pre-activating his other skills in order to increase his strength, accuracy, and focus on the enemy. The final shot, and that's it. The bullet now flies along the specified trajectory. The only thing the archer is concentrating on now is whether it will hit its adversary. Fortunately, it flew exactly on target and destroyed the monster completely, from which he fell as a layer on the ground in a dense forest, from which this story began. And then the system came into play again, informing him that it had gained more experience for defeating the twin-headed ogre. Having finished with his opponents, Archer IAN went up close to him to see what had fallen out of him and what items he could pick up for himself. He was very surprised, for he had been rewarded with boots and shoulder pads that had previously belonged to the ogre. It was not surprising because they were very rare, and to get them was like winning the lottery. If you sold them, you could earn at least 5 million won. He was beyond happy, as if he had won a month's worth of happiness at once. Isn't that all? Wait a minute, what's that over there? It turned out that he was also rewarded with Mayulin's crystal, which glittered all around him. He couldn't believe it. That's where Kailan comes in, which is the greatest VR game that was released 6 months ago and had an audience of over 10 million players. It was so popular that it dominates the entire gaming industry. When our hero purchased a capsule for 10 million won to play the game, using all of his and his parents' savings for his studies, everyone told him he was crazy, and all this despite the fact that he started playing 2 months after the release of the game, and in 4 months was able to pump an impressive archer, which today defeated ogres. Monster hunting began to bring him about 200,000 won every hour, and he himself had already made millions from this game. The only problem is that very soon will be announced a new update, which will add at once 3 new classes and a new region. All the players were very happy to hear this news. However, in the city, some players immediately began to worry, as they would have to delete their current character in order to start the game in the new world, even though they had already made it this far. Archer suggested just going into the woods afterwards and picking up new items when they add a new region to be able to pay tuition, if you're lucky. That was their plan for the near future. Myolin's crystal and was a very valuable item that could help them discover a hidden class and solve their questions. Grasping his head, Archer realizes that the only problem is that it can only be used by characters who are below level 10. And he realizes that he needs to completely purge his character if he wants to use the crystal. But the thought of doing it after he's already made a lot of money, thanks to his character, kept him busy. He continued to sit on the ground, pondering what he should do, while a bright flash appeared over his head and illuminated his body. Suddenly, his friend starts shouting sharply, asking if he's really going to remove his hero, who is already level 93. That would be a very dumb loss. He picked up his phone and saw that his character was at the top, among all the players in Korea, and does he really want to lose it all right now? Archer wonders if he doesn't know it himself, but he also realizes that this is a unique chance to unlock the first hidden character class, and he can't just take his crystal and throw it away. Here his friend stops him a bit and asks him to at least understand a little bit about what will be in the hidden classes. And they have a dialogue, because the game already has a sniper from the hidden class, with which the archer used to go hunting. They begin to argue whether the sniper is really much better for the archer, to which he cannot give a definite answer, but only praises their attack, but specifies that the rate of fire is lame and will be difficult for them, and fight a bunch of mobs for them to be much harder. Here they agree that even if it's a hidden character class, that doesn't mean it's going to be much better. That's why he starts yelling at the archer, asking why does he want to lose everything and start from scratch. He answers that he can easily earn 1 million just by hunting the characters, and asks why he still plays the game. He was perplexed, of course, and replied, because it's fun. Well, since it's fun, that's the answer. What? New hidden class? I think it's going to be super fun. After hearing the answer, his friend still agrees and says, let him do what he wants. He's not going to stop him, just asks him to try very hard, to which he agrees. Outside, the sun was already starting to set and evening was approaching. At the same time in Kylan, everything was just fine and bright weather. Some grandfather was meditating, and there were a bunch of artifacts around him. Suddenly, an archer approaches him, and he gets a little wary, asking what he wants from him. He explained that he was looking for a reincarnation, and right after that, the grandfather's eyes turned red, and he said that the guy was exactly in the right place. He pulled a red bottle out of his pocket, which was very shiny, and had already begun to pass it to the guy, when suddenly, he grabbed it abruptly and clarified if he knew the consequences, because after he drinks that bottle, he will lose absolutely all his power and what he has collected for so long, and there will be no way to get it back. He turns to him and tells him that this is why he is going to drink all its contents. After he got the bottle, he went to the mountains to consider and make a decision for himself. For this would be the most expensive rebirth for him, and if he was lucky enough, he could get even better stats than he has now. He discovered a statistic that told of his potion, which was made by ancient alchemists. After looking at it once more and taking it in his hands, the guy decided that he would make many times more money with the new class and decided that it was worth taking the potion right now, which he did. His face changed and the system reported that his level and stats would be reset. Meanwhile, at the training center after the reincarnation, all the people were puzzled and wondered very much how long he could train. They said they had never seen such intense training. At the same time, the archer waving his sword and saying that tomorrow, it will be the final day, when the renewal will come after all. He wanted to approach this as prepared as possible. Meanwhile, the gate opened and there was a purple bright flash around it that blinded everyone around it very badly. Our hero had a scan, which the system informed him of, and welcomed him to the new world of Kylan. His character began to somehow stand out from the rest, as the rebirth had already taken place. The first thing he did was try to find the Summoners Guild, which he did very quickly, since their house was very close by. He walked up to it, opened the doors, and started calling out for someone, clarifying if anyone was in it. Without hearing an answer, he went in and began to examine it. Seeing no one, he decided that he was probably the only one here and the very first to arrive. He began to walk up the steps and entered an interesting large room that was the decision-making center of the guild. There, the master of the Cane Guild was already waiting for him. Haruhiro came up to him and said he wanted to join their guild. Of course, the master said that the path of the summoner, not easy, and to control the fierce monsters is not for everyone. The archer knows all this, and believes that this class is as strong as it is difficult to master. With which the wizard agrees and says that, most likely, our hero is just the right candidate. But before he is accepted into the guild, he asks one last time, is he really sure he wants to change his class to summoner? To which, of course, our hero agrees and pulls out his crystal, saying that his time has come, and he must give it to the master right now, and holds it out. He began to shine so strongly that the master was in complete shock. His face was in a cold sweat. He was shocked and frightened, for he did not understand where our hero got it from. He also knew the history of the crystal in question, which our archer immediately guessed, and the master complimented him on the fact that it was much more interesting than he had originally anticipated. He smiled and said, "Let's get me into the hidden class." But the master then asked him to do him a favor as well, to which the archer agreed and said he was willing to do whatever it took. And the master began to tell him the story that recently, a blue-eyed wolf had appeared in the plains, and that his son just recently changed his class also to a summoner, and wanted to get himself a blue-eyed wolf, making him his surname. He asked our hero to grab him, which of course surprised him very much, because he did not understand how to do it. And this, absolutely no surprise, because Blue-Eyed Wolf, it is a rare monster that was above level 40. He really didn't understand why such a powerful monster was involved in a level 10 player's class change quest. After all, it seems completely illogical. To which the master replies that since he is busy here with his duties, he cannot go himself, and he is really ashamed to talk about it. But his son is really too weak to defeat this monster. In return for his help, he offers our hero as many as 5 magical binding scrolls. He suggests wearying the wolf as much as possible, and then tying him with these scrolls. He also clarified that the wolf that appeared in the removed plane is still very young, so it should not be too strong, which means it can be easily defeated. And then, a message appears from the system, which will bring him the task of defeating the blue-eyed wolf in the raw mud plain, tying him up, and bringing him and his son to the master. At the bottom there is an offer to accept the challenge or not, and seeing that it is a hidden class, of course agrees, and says that he will bring the wolf at any cost. The master thanked him and sent him on his journey, telling him that if he did not succeed, to come back here immediately, and he would be given help. The archer also realized that the quest would not fail if he failed at once, and went, letting him know that he had heard the wizard. He remembered his training center, and how he began to train hard to improve his efficiency and pump up his skills. Where all the people who looked at him were completely shocked, and were surprised that not everyone can train so intensively. He went, declaring, "Let's finally do it already." As a rule, monsters in the Ramud Plain, all 10th level on average. And if it is a blue-eyed wolf, it should not be too strong, since it is still young. And also, he remembers that even though he is a 10th level, his attributes are already closer to the players of the 30th level. That's why he has to succeed. He pulls out his system to take another look at this adversary. He finds it, and he sees it for what it should be. But here, he was as surprised and frightened did not understand why he even level 20, although it does not matter to him at all, since his attributes are high. But how is he supposed to fight a level 20, staying only at 10? He did not understand whether the quests of the hidden classes, always such a difficult question mark, and at least he won't have to worry about killing him with a single hit, because that could have happened if he was level 10. He didn't want to drag it out too long, so he tried to get down to business quickly. He gave his bow and aimed the wolf, whereupon the arrow already flew at its recipient. It hit the wolf, which began to growl. He looked in the direction from which the arrow flew at him, and saw our archer. His eyes were very angry. He turned sharply and began to run immediately in the direction of our hero. He began to think that so the wolf can die. So as soon as he approached him, the archer struck him with his fist, which even the wolf tears, and he walked away. But our hero did not stop, and decided that first he will beat him, and then tie it, because in order to do this, the level of health of the monster must drop. After he beat him, he tried to tie him up, but it was unsuccessful. Then the archer began to think what he should do, because if he hits him again, the wolf just might die. That is why there is a logical question. What should he do? How should he be? The archer decides not to think too much, and realizes that first it is necessary to heal him a little, so that he does not die. He takes a piece of meat out of his pocket, and offers to put it in Wolf's mouth, so that he can heal himself, and at least eat something. After the wolf had already moved away, our hero said that it was time to go back to the beating. After that, the wolf started crying. Their actions could be seen even from the very edge of the mountain. The archer restarted the binding procedure. After that, the system turned on, and reported that this time, the process was as successful as possible, and the blue-eyed wolf was bound. Quite the hero, holding the Asuvoi in his hands, was finally happy that he had succeeded, reasoning that beating it always works. But he, a little bit, began to regret wasting a lot of his time. Probably already a lot of users have changed their class to summoners. That's why he needs to hurry to keep up. He immediately returned to the village, where he was greeted by the master, and told that it was not an easy task, with which, of course, Jan agreed, stating that it was a stubborn wolf, but he was able to overpower him, and held out Asuva. The master could not believe his eyes, and once again asked if he had curbed the blue-eyed wolf. I said yes, and wondered what's basically wrong with that. On the face of the master, there was great surprise. He could not believe his eyes, as he understood that the first quest was to be failed. But our hero succeeded, unbelievably. After this task, our hero asked again, can he now become a monster tamer? To which the master gave him the answer, and said that the job does not suit him. From which our hero was very surprised. Instead, he was offered the role of master, which surprised and delighted him greatly. A system opened up to him, informing him that the guild master was impressed with his potential, and wants to instruct Ian on the path of the master. He was astonished, for he had never heard of a class change quest being set up like this, on which the system reappears to him. She told him that if he accepted the offer, he could become a master tamer, and asked him if he was ready for it. Ian thought it more likely that the Master of Forgiveness. It is a much higher level position than monster tamers. That's why, without thinking for a second, he decided he wanted to become a master. Immediately, everything around him began to shine. Huge lightning bolts appeared. Everything around him was in a purple bright glare that dazzled everything around him. This is how his rebirth into a taming master came about, after which he was given 4 new attributes and 500 reputation points at once. Thanks to this quest, Ian was able to become the first master tamer in history. Our story continues with our hero, named Ian, becoming the first master of taming in history, managing to defeat a huge and scary blue-eyed wolf, who was 10 levels taller than him. And right now, his reincarnation is happening, as well as his home. in which he received his first assignment from Sensei. Everything shines around him. He himself is happy to have become a master tamer. After he got his new role by opening the system, he decided to think about what he should do first. Here he was immediately given a new task, namely to tame the summoned beast. Immediately, everything changed beside him. He was already standing with a staff in his hands and began to say that he would tame the bloody wolf, like in that trailer. It was really something. He should have been a first at Kylon by now. Then he looked up at the mountain, and around it was a very clear view of the blue sky. It seemed that absolutely nothing foretold trouble, even if you could just take a rest. Suddenly, our hero's face changed very much, and he was perplexed. Looking at the bottom, it looks like there were already those who had transferred to the new class, because after him there was an army of almost 20 people who also got their assignments. It looked about as if they were trying to capture the bloody wolf themselves. After looking at them, Ian didn't think anyone would be quicker than him, but decides to go over and see how things are going in general. As suddenly, one takes the staff, reads a book, the second waving something, the third already firing a bow. It seems that this is a whole team of players who decided to go to the next level together. A shot, and the fire hits right into the red wolf, which starts growling. One of them starts shouting out that health is exactly the same as it was before, when our archer tried to capture. In response, the girl offers to simply seal it. The sorcerer takes a suvoi and begins to bind the wolf. Literally a few seconds pass, and he is already trapped. As suddenly, the wolf begins to growl. His eyes begin to pancake. He abruptly begins to jump, and what all in utter bewilderment. No one can believe their eyes. It seems that the wolf really wants to get out, which the rest of the team make it a point not to miss and catch him. And then, just 15 seconds later, the wolf was already out of his trap. Everyone was just shocked and perplexed, because it would be much harder to meet a bloody wolf again, after they had already missed him. How nice that Aang was able to observe him apparently. It is indeed difficult to capture a monster of such a high class. Also, he concluded that they are also long to find, so he thought it was probably better to start catching absolutely any monster encountered. Looking again into the distance, from the cliff, he decided to think and declared that he was a true gamer, which made him wonder how many wolves he could capture with his score in leadership. Suddenly, by a coincidence, just such under his rock began to pass at least 3 wolves. With absolutely no time to think, the bow and began to shoot, while the sun continued to glare. And now, the first wolf is already lying on the floor, while our hero opens his uvoi. The system informed him that the first wolf had already been successfully captured. It was the most common wolf that lived in the meadows, had fast legs, and also sharp fangs. But the only thing that surprised him was, what is timid? Do monsters really have personalities? Without thinking long, he saw an angry wolf, who apparently was a friend of the previous one, begin to pounce on him. The archer scratched his head and realized that, okay, let's keep going. And again, a shot. From the cliff, you can see not blue sky, but red glare. After successfully catching the wolf, the archer decided to see what its identity was. Suddenly, he could not understand anything. He was completely shocked, because it was also a wolf, but already with a different personality. But his attributes are much higher and called, he is different. Looking at this situation, the archer realized that monsters of the same type and level can, it turns out, have different attributes. At this moment, another pack of wolves began to pass under the rock. That's why our archer decided to check which of these wolves would have the highest attributes. He came up with a genius idea and decided to catch wolves all day. And he will capture those wolves who will have the highest attributes, and again takes a shot into the blue sky. Suddenly, after another capture, the system informed him that his attribute was increased by 1 level after a series of successful captures, from which our hero was very happy. and realized that to repeat and repeat, that's life. At that time, he was added another title, an expert on wolves for capturing a large number of them. His advantage now will be that he will be able to identify the strongest wolves, even without capture. Now he will not have to catch absolutely everyone in a row. Our hero cannot understand why they could not do exactly the same only for all the other participants, although he himself realizes that he is asking too much. Without thinking long, he decides to see how to use his superpower after all, and begins to do his analysis. Among the 4 wolves, he saw at once one level 11, another level 12, another level 11, another level 10 wolves. Based on this, you can understand that the analysis works perfectly. At the same time, he decided to put a lot of emphasis on the level 11 wolf. He walked closer to him and asked himself, would this one be now? At the same time, the wolf's eyes became red. It was obvious that he was very angry and began to growl at him. The archer, not for a second, was not frightened, but only began to laugh and ask the wolf what he would do. Obviously, the wolf rushed at him in an attack, which our hero was, of course, ready for. And he kept smiling, took out his bow, and shot at the wolf, from which he fell quite ridiculously. Now, our hero decided to teach him a lesson, and said that now the wolf seems to know his place, and made a grab for him. After analyzing the wolf, it was clear that he was level 11 as no surprise. But what was really worth attention, and even made our hero's face smile in surprise, was that the wolf was level 11, but his attributes were higher than the wolf at level 13. Besides, it can evolve. Is it really capable of evolution? Other wolves our hero doesn't need anymore. He just needs to focus on training this one. He kindly takes and lets all the other wolves go, while he sits down with his main one, who he wanted to train, and asks him to bark. From that point on, he decided to call him by his new name, which is Lie, and the wolf seems to like his new name too. After that, their closeness increased, and so did Lie's loyalty, as the system itself informed him. He was very surprised because he didn't even know there was such an attribute as fidelity. Great. Now it's time to start hunting, he said to his wolf, which made him growl, and they began to run somewhere together. The only question I have is, how can you love someone who beat you? Meanwhile, the situation in the city began to heat up, with the Lotus Guild becoming much weaker when Jin Sung left it. He said he was changing his class. I wonder how he's doing. That's what his friend was thinking. Who wouldn't let him change his class, and was now sitting there practically alone? That's why he got information about the summoner class and began to study it. He didn't understand what was wrong with those headlines. He decided to look at it more closely and saw the analysis of the archer, that is his friend, in which he reported that he is already summoner 12th level. And here are his conclusions after the hunt. He stated that this class is very funny, and he became a caller at the very beginning of the launch server. But the only thing that embarrassed him, that is, a small disadvantage, is that the experience is very, very slow. All the people who wanted to change the class or have already done it constantly complained that the level increase is very slow. And this is done because the experience is divided between your summoned creatures. Reading all these headlines, his friends started to think that this is just the beginning, so naturally there will be a lot of complaints. But even looking at this picture, things look pretty sad because Jin Sung dropped his character just for this. But it seems to be true that the level rise is very slow indeed at first. He begins to think that it might take a long time to reach level 20 and join the guild. Meanwhile, back to Kylan. The sun has already set behind the mountains, and our heroes continue their hunt. When suddenly, completely unexpectedly, the system alerts Jin Sung that he has already reached level 20. A little earlier in the hunt, he asked his wolf to attack first, immediately after the arrow flew, so that he would not attack first and take damage. He activated another superpower, and his dexterity increased by as much as 37%. And so he takes his bow, throws his arrow, and it hits the exact target. Immediately after it, our wolf began to run at the animal. He ran up very quickly, after which immediately bit her and began to fight her. A very strong battle. At this time, our hero was already running up to help, and noticed that his level and attributes lower than the red fox. That's why he ran up to help, but he realizes that the wolf is really very good. Because he attacks without any fear? Maybe it's because of his personality? Once more he praised his wolf, and threw another arrow to help him. The wolf, of course, he growled back, and continued to attack the red fox. After this was successfully completed, the system gave them both 265 experience points each. Then the archer realized that the experience is shared equally, which means he needs to pump Lai to at least the 15th level. That's why, without wasting a second, and activates the ability to train the newcomer, and begins to train him. Then asks him to give a paw, then to bring a stick. It was noticeable that the pet's potential improved with each training session. They successfully managed to find a common language, and the pet was able to learn some necessary skills, after which the mutual understanding between them in the team grew. Suddenly, the pet begins to transform into something else. Around him again begins to glow. Everything shines, and the system reports that Lai has already reached level 15. Great. Ready, but the only thing that bothers our hero is that they swing much slower than he thought. Maybe it's probably because the experience is divided equally. Even so, he realizes that Lai is really fun to train with, and he gets a lot stronger with each level he raises. After that, Jean suggests that he now go bear hunting. Now he realizes that he can go to another location to hunt. And so, they are already in the woods near the bridge, around which are walking in clumps of big bears. One of them notices the two friends and starts growling sharply at them. At this time, the system appears and gives our heroes on top of a few more experience points, as well as a notification that they have learned some super skills. And then, the archer realizes that they did not work in vain. I need to see what this ability. It turns out that the blessing of the warrior Berserk gives you and his comrades an increase in attack power, as much as 30% for a full 20 minutes. But if you use it on the pet, it will increase its attack power by as much as 100%. Looking at this situation, the archer realizes that this ability is very good. Further, they began to study the tactics of the newcomer, which they also pumped. It turned out that the leadership increased by 10%, as well as understanding of the orders. And if the leadership also increased, then perhaps already be able to capture the bear. That's why the archer does not waste a second and offers to catch them. But before that, he wonders if there is someone stronger for Lai. Without thinking twice, he immediately begins to make a grab and realizes that his lead has increased significantly, and it is precisely because of the rookie's tactics. He pulls out the stats and wants to compare them to the attributes that Lai has. He absolutely in no way can understand what is happening, and begins to question whether Lai is really a wolf, because then why he does not evolve. Look at this situation. He decides to let this bear go for now, and goes back to the wolf asking if he had a good rest, because it's already time to hunt. He activates several abilities at once, and begins to run with it, ordering it to attract this bear. The wolf immediately ran to carry out the order, and threw himself into the fight. He bit sharply into the bear's neck, and they got into a fight. It was really, really scary to watch. It looked like the wolf was ready to destroy the bear, even though he had a much lower level than the bear. Seeing this situation, the archer asks him to continue, and is surprised at the newcomer's tactics. Really very good, because his pet perfectly understands what he needs from him. While the wolf and the bear continue to fight, the archer shoots him and they destroy him together. And immediately, there is an alert from the system. which reports that the pet is already upgraded to level 19, which makes everyone very happy. The hero begins stroking his pet and asks him to keep growing, because soon, at this rate, he will no longer be equal. But the only thing he's worried about is that they're too slow to pump. That's why the archer decides to take quests after the moment when he reaches level 20. Tired, the archer decides that, for today, that will be all, and the gamer's life too. Meanwhile, it's getting dark outside the window. Wiping his head with a towel, John decides he needs to check another forum before going to bed. Surely some losers are complaining again right now. He sits down at the computer and realizes that this is really true. A lot of people start whining about how the summoner is useless. Summoned creatures are too weak, pumping is too slow, and so on. He concluded that there's really too much whining here, but the only thing he was really interested in was if there's any feedback from people above level 15 here, and he was very surprised, because he could not find anyone, despite the fact that he was already level 20th. He began to think there must be a lot of players already above level 15th. But here, on the forum, no one. Oh, he was able to find someone level 13 and decides to check him out. His abilities were exactly the same as our heroes. But the only thing that surprised him was Obsession, in which 30% of a creature's attributes are transferred and summon or absorb the soul of its pet. This very much surprised our hero, because he does not have such an ability. At the same time, he realizes that it really is very good, because you can say that it is the bread of the caller, and since it does not need to share experience, leveling up is much faster, and he concludes, why absorb a pet that can fight itself? Moreover, if also the attributes are not fully transferred. He sits back and thinks that even the level of the summoned beast is not raised. This is the most interesting thing in the game for the caller, and he, for some reason, does not have this ability, although he does not really somehow want it. Suddenly, all of a sudden, he begins to think, what if the abilities of ordinary conscripts are different from his? In that case, he's already settled into his chair and started smiling. If that's really the case, what is his ability that normal summoners don't have? Our story doesn't end there. It just continues. So be sure to subscribe and like the channel so you don't miss out. Well, in the meantime, our story continues from the point where the hero realized that he is really different from others. This is why he decides to determine what superpower he has that is different from other summoners. And so, after taking a sip of water, he guessed that this is what beginner's training is all about. Now the main task is to understand how it still works, since he does not have enough information. But if you summarize, it is easy to guess that the Master of Taming has less fighting abilities than a normal summoner. That's why our hero realized that it was easier for him to pump his pet and concluded that he was moving exactly in the right direction. After which he smiled and was full of confidence. After that, he stepped away from the computer and thought it would be a good idea to capture a monster of a rare or super unique class. Meanwhile, it was dark enough outside, exactly 4 o'clock on the clock. It turns out that our hero had spent the entire night pondering this question. He took another look at his capsule and decided to get into it right away. His idea was that he would pump his live wolf up to level 20 before the sun went down, thanks to his experience and skill. And so, he's already in the woods, standing by his wolf, and he says they're going to do it all now. Wolf looked at him and mentally agreed, whereupon the archer immediately activated to make it easier for Wolf. Thus, the rookie's training began. They also activated the skill of searching for weaknesses, after which the wolf immediately began to attack the bear, and the archer shot his arrow at him, in order to help. He immediately began to growl sharply. It was obvious that he just wants to destroy everyone in his path. Suddenly, the wolf immediately attacked him and sharply bit the bear's neck, from which they had a very quick fight, which resulted in the team destroyed the moon bear and earned 545 experience points each. The archer was as surprised as possible, because he did not expect that so quickly they would be able to destroy this monster. And the archer himself in general went to this forest, back when he himself was about level 35, in a past life, before he did reincarnation. From this, he deduced that his hunting speed was much faster than it had been before. After that, immediately without wasting a second of time, the wolf decided not to wait and immediately pounced on another bear. And the archer decided to help him. Through teamwork, they had already developed a passion, and they just started running and hunting everything in their path together. But suddenly, Jin Sung stopped and thought. He was a little amazed, because in front of them there was a whole bunch of big bears, among which one stood out very strongly. It was obvious that he really looked much bigger than the others. Suddenly, he immediately asked the system to help him deal with this wolf, and blue indicators appeared near his eyes, indicating that it was Jet Black Moon Bear. There was a huge bear who was the king of this forest. He was a unique monster. But instead of fear, our archer had a rather unusual reaction. And the only thing that occurred to him after he sat down on his knees was whether he could capture it. He asked the system, and the system told him that his level was too low to do that yet. All of this because he let go of the last bear, but his leadership is still not enough to make it happen. Therefore, the best solution they could make is to just run away, which they actually started to do, because so far they can't stand up to this bear. The only thing Jin said during this process was that when they were in town, it would be a good idea to get some magical binding scrolls. But time was catastrophically short because the bear immediately began to run after them, which is why our archer decided to suspend him with his arrow, from which he was very much shocked and began to growl sharply, as if to hint that someone will now be very hurt. And after the arrow flew accurately in the target, the wolf also decided not to waste his time and immediately ran to help. In parallel, he roared sharply at the bear and immediately rushed into battle. Even though he was noticeably bigger and stronger, his eyes were red. You could tell he was furious as he started growling back even more. It seemed as if he was about to tear the bear apart. But on the face of our archer, absolutely no panic and fear, because now that the wolf fights almost as well as he does, then monsters even 38th level will not be a problem for them at all. These were the thoughts he had while the bear began to smash the wolf and destroy everything in front of him. At that moment, the wolf's eyes changed just as abruptly. They now had only a blue hue and a noticeable desire to fight. After which he swooped down sharply on the bear, and again managed to hit him in the neck, using his crowning move. From what he simply lost consciousness, and the system informed the guys that they had already managed to destroy even such a bear and received 1.45 experience points. And the pet itself has already been upgraded to level 20, which was a shock to Jean and a joy to behold. Now the full possibilities will only be after you reach level 20, such as registering in the guild, various quests, and so on. The master praised his pet while the bear lay unconscious on the ground. After that, he immediately logged into his system to see what items he had received, and he had a very big smile on his face. It turns out that the system decided to reward the boys with moon bear meat, and also gave them the bear hunter's battle hammer and the black necklace, which was made of coal. Quite a good set, because no one has ever seen anything like this before. At the same time, the wolf also continued to look at the statistics and stood behind his friend. In order to study this, he used the identification scroll and evaluated the necklace. It began to shine very strongly. Everything was a rosy white hue and shone all over the forest. It turns out that this necklace was of unknown origin, created from obsidian, which was exactly as black as the abyss, and it looks insanely expensive. The master remembered that he already had a pretty good necklace from the auction before, but this, much better. From which he began to smile and rejoice, imagining how much money he could already make from this. I also argue that this is his first good reward since reincarnation. Going back to his wolf, he said the items were really good, but the only thing he was interested in besides that was how much Lai's attributes had increased. It turned out that the defense was increased by 2 attack by 4, but dexterity, what is it? For some reason, he was immediately puzzled. Do monsters get much stronger as they level up? No, something still doesn't add up. The master was shocked and couldn't understand what was going on. He picked up the book again and began to study it in detail, taking note of every word, in which he could find roughly the following answer: that there was no pattern in the rate of growth. They made it by accident, didn't they? At that moment, the wolf was just crazy happy, stuck out his tongue, and just enjoyed the moment. But the archer couldn't figure out what was going on, so he realized that he had to find out how it all worked. And then, all of a sudden, it came to him the realization that this potential, it turns out the secret is in the attribute of potential. It may seem difficult now, but training a novice increases the potential of the pet. And every time the potential increases by 10, the attribute growth rate also increases. He knew it, but rookie training is unpredictable enough that he was just furious. And indeed, he was right. The hidden class has its own unique abilities, but each monster also has an attribute potential, which determine the rate of growth of their attributes as the level increases. At this point, the wolf's stats opened up, and he was able to understand that the monster class itself is enhanced by its potential, and it is the ability to train a rookie that enhances it. That's why, after another look at the system, he decided that he would spend all of his skill points on training. It was not an easy decision, but now the system reported that all skill points were spent, and the skill rookie training was raised to level 5 and has already become an intermediate training. Then the system opened up again and told me what would be in this update. It appears that there will be an improvement in the understanding of the master's commands. The potential of the pet will also increase, and the abilities will also increase. And what a good thing it was that the wizard had the good sense to spend all those skill points not on capturing that bear. He was very happy, he was pleased that he could solve this riddle, because the potential of his wolf is now 94. And soon it should be 100, if everything goes at the same pace. They were very happy and proud of themselves. But suddenly he looked at his watch and realized that he had wasted almost an hour of his time. That's why he looked at the wolf and realized that they need to get experience much faster. After eating his sandwich, he said that if he had been as diligent in his studies, he probably would have been a doctor or a lawyer too. But in the meantime, there's no point thinking about it now, because he's eating his sandwich by the monitor, and he's on a very important mission in the game. Suddenly, he stumbles upon a video of a dark sorcerer, which really shocks him. He looks at them and emphasizes the fact that they are quite cute, although in fact it looks quite intimidating. At that moment, his phone rings, which makes him a little shocked, because he certainly did not expect any call, much less from unknown numbers. As usual, he picked up the phone and immediately, an unfamiliar voice clarified whether he was really talking to Jin Sung. But after he confirmed this, the voice also introduced himself that his name was Lee Ji-hyun, and she was a teacher in the virtual reality department of a Korean university. After that, the face of our hero changed a lot for the better, after which he said hello to her. She asked if he knew Professor Lee Jin-wook. Of course, he's the head professor. And then she said that he asked him to call him, something that the guy was just in shock. His body immediately formed a cold sweat, and he panicked and asked what had happened. And strange as it may seem, it's probably because of the grades. At this point, the guy threw his phone away and started crying. He really couldn't figure out what. Is he really going to be expelled from the university now? He asked what would happen if he didn't call the professor, and that's why he turned to the girl. She responded by saying that his grades would just go home that way, and of course it was not about his place of residence. At this point, the guy got nervous because he immediately realized where the letter of happiness would be sent. And if his father saw the grades, it would be very, very bad. He immediately had a picture in his mind of Darth Vader as his father, and it was as if he was telling him that he was very disappointed in him. From this information, he suddenly began to panic, very much afraid of being forced to return home at the peak of his adolescence. Gritting his teeth, with a lot of fear and worry, he said he could still call back, after which the girl just hung up and said she'd see him next semester. After the conversation was over, the guy decided there was nothing to retreat from, and we had to do it after all, and started looking for the number. A minute later, the boss picks up the phone and starts talking to him. Surprisingly, he can barely remember who Jin Sung is. Turns out to be a new student. Panicked and not understanding what was going on, the boy decided to ask what they wanted him to do, to which the supervisor asked, "Doesn't he have a clue himself?" In a panic, he started screaming, and he asked, "Is it because of the grades?" When this was confirmed, the director asked if he was all right, and why he was not involved in the life of the department at all, and how in the world he had managed to find himself on the verge of expulsion at the end of the first semester. Was it not because of 3 non-credits in a row? The guy was very surprised because he only had 2 credits, but the director stopped him and said that this is absolutely correct. But right now, he is thinking whether to give him another 3rd. Here, the guy just exploded. He couldn't understand why he was threatening him. Why was he doing that? He was just as angry as possible and wanted to destroy the first object nearby. But as he tempered his anger a little, he practically answered the principal in a calm voice and politely asked what he needed to do after all. First of all, he advised him to figure out how to get rid of the fact that he does not participate in the life of the department. At this point, he decides whether or not to talk, because he can't just say that it's all about the game. So how does he answer the boss? Then he comes up with a genius idea, and he says that, "Sir, you see, the reason why he chose the virtual reality department is because he admires the unbounded potential of virtual reality." The director didn't quite understand what he meant and asked him to continue. And one of the reasons for the popularity of virtual reality is the game Kylon, the guy clarified. And after the director confirmed this, it was as if the guy's hands were untied, and he went on to say that his main task now was to study virtual reality from the inside. His boss interrupted him a little and asked him if he really didn't come to the university because he was playing a game all day, to which the guy replied that he was not just playing, but exploring the incredibly detailed virtual world that is available in the game. The director just sits in shock and does not understand what kind of nonsense the student is telling him, but still decides to ask what his level is, from which the guy was certainly shocked, because he certainly did not expect such a question. But that's okay. The director immediately replied that he was just asking about the level of the guy, because if he worked so well and so hard, he should have been ranked among the best players in Korea, shouldn't he? At this point, the guy got really nervous because if he hadn't deleted his account and reincarnated, now he could really prove it all to him. But now he had to excuse himself and went to the director, saying that there was a slightly different situation. He immediately remembered his character, which he now has level 20, but also continued that he originally had level 93. But because he recently dropped his character and did a reincarnation, he now only has level 20. To which the director just laughed and said that it was really very funny, even though the guy wanted to prove that it was really true. In response to this, the principal only asked not to hold him for a fool. Because does the guy really think that if he says it confidently, you can avoid problems with your studies? He really tries to avoid problems, but he can't think of anything better to do than to suggest an argument to the director. He was really shocked, because no student had ever offered him anything like that before. The boy suggested a bet to prove whether he was lying or not, which really interested the boss, and he asked, "Will the guy really reach level 93 before the next semester starts?" To which he confidently replied yes, and asked if he could reach level 93 before the beginning of the semester. Wouldn't that prove he had it? True, of course, the principal himself sometimes plays in Thailand, because if he succeeds, it will solve all his problems with his studies. Now admit it, would you like to get exactly the same director? Write your answers in the comments or like to see how many of us? But if he fails, not only will he go to a retake, but the principal will also talk to his parents about their son's future. A little worried, the guy still agrees. But the director went on to say that the guy should be involved in the life of the faculty. Besides, he added that if he won the argument, he would give the guy credit for all his classes, regardless of attendance, because he knew the guy would screw up anyway, and he wouldn't get anything done. Hearing such good news, the boy was very happy, but still asked the director whether he would really keep his word, which the latter affirmed in the affirmative. The guy thanked him and said he was going to try his best, because it's incredible. Immediately after they talked on the phone, the guy got into his game pod without further thought, and then, a second later, he is in the game, along with his partner Wolf, which begins to greet him and growl kindly. He strokes him, and says that after all, they will have to work very hard, to which the wolf of course agrees. But there is absolutely nothing complicated or new in this, because the guy was planning to get back to his previous level anyway, and since he avoided retakes, now nothing will distract him, and he can do it absolutely no problem. Especially since he'll also get credit without even attending classes, so he'll definitely do it. Having received a charge of motivation, he looks at the building and realizes that first he still needs to join the guild, which is why he approaches the merchant and informs him of this. He greets the guy and asks, most likely he has reached level 20, so which guild would he like to join? The guy starts smiling and says that he likes the Lotos Guild and would like to join it. But unfortunately, his interlocutor upset the guy, because the desired level to join the Lotos Guild, a minimum of 60. But in order for the guy not to get too upset, the man informed him that he would place his request, but still not sure if he would be considered, so if it suits him, he can continue. The guy agrees, smiles and says that the guild leaders are his best friend and he's really close to those who make decisions there, so it's not that important. Well, in the meantime, the man informed him that he had placed his request to join, and he will be automatically registered when the guild master accepts it. Great! Jin was very excited and asked if he should text Hyun to accept his application. But, unfortunately, he's offline. But that's okay, because it's not that the guy was in a hurry. Let him have no reason to worry, because his application will be accepted anyway. Immediately thereafter, he moved into the auction house and began to glow with a blue flame that signaled that teleportation was now taking place. He laughed and realized that his job now was to get himself some gear. His advantage of being a very successful newcomer, which is why he would change all his equipment with the best items he could find. But there is an interesting point. The bonus attributes of the summoner class are not added to his combat attributes, but only to attributes that help with summoning, such as taming. The master thought about it and realized that sooner or later his pets would become his main power. He continued to look around the store, and he wondered if there was something here that could improve the attributes of his pet already. For example, could it be some item that would be enchanted to enhance? Suddenly, something made him very suspicious. This was Mother Nature's armband, thanks to which all pets can receive a 20% bonus to their survivability and a 15% bonus to their attack gain. Moreover, the chance for a pet to return from a projectile increases by 5% at once. Seeing this offer, the archer didn't think much of it and realized that he would definitely take it, after which the system informed him that he bought this armband for 150,000 gold. He was very happy that the items for the summoners were finally starting to be sold. But suddenly, he thought, perhaps there are other Mother Nature items for summoners? He turned to the system and entered Mother Nature in the search, and was very surprised, because quite a few other options were found. For example, it gives all pets a 35% boost in attack power, and increases critical hit chance by as much as 15%. It turns out quite an interesting dilemma, because the archer uses a bow but a staff. Should he really take it? It's not clear yet. But why should he think he won't use his bow right forever? That's why he's spending practically all of his funds on this method, which immediately, again with magical blue glare, passes into his hands. After the deal has already been closed, the archer looks at his inventory and realizes that it's still pretty early, but it would be nice to get used to a different style of battle. So far it is really very strange to hold the staff in his hands and very unaccustomed. But in the meantime, he and his wolf standing near the arch, after which the master performs a call. It turns out that the average training works even in cities, so it is better to use it constantly. That's why, in order not to waste time, the team right now begins a period of quests. Meanwhile, the weather in the city was very clear. It was very warm, and the birds were drinking, as suddenly someone shouted out and said that others should also look at it, for there was a caller in front of them. But it didn't end there, and he went on to say that his pet is a miserable wolf who must have a very low level. There was absolutely no reaction from the master, while a bunch of people surrounded him completely unnoticed at once, half of whom were in shock. One of them added that he heard that the summoner has a very slow pumping, and he does not know if anyone has reached at least level 15. But the team had absolutely no reaction to them, not wasting their precious time and energy. Instead, the archer said he would take up the quest to clear the camp, as during its execution experience for goblins will be doubled. But he said he would get the whole experience alone. At this time, they saw their first NPC for quest, whom they immediately approached and said hello. The master waved his hand and hoped the character hadn't forgotten him after the reincarnation. He answered right away, "Oh, look at that. It's Ian." A dialogue immediately ensued between them, during which the master asked how he was doing. He also noticed that the character's attitude didn't seem to reset toward him, which is very good. He asked if they had had any problems with the goblins, to which the NPC replied, just about to say that they had had some problems because of the goblin camp, since their mopping up team couldn't deal with them. "I assume you know a good mercenary who can really help?" "I will personally take care of it," replied the master, and smiled, to which the NPC thanked him, and said it would be very cool, but it would be better to take someone else. Meanwhile, the master looks into his system, which is already showing him the information in green. And there is a new mission, clearing the goblin camp in Somer Canyon. And it is also reported that Raphael, who is the leader of the city, is looking for people in the sweep team. Is our hero ready to accept this assignment? The archer smiled a little, and seemed to remember everything correctly. Suddenly he got nervous. The quest is a group one. That's why he began racking his brains thinking about whom all the same can be invited, because it is unlikely in the guild there are newcomers who will be below level 40. Then he stops and asks if he can't postpone the sweep until he can find a group. "Sure. I can do that for you. Maybe you can take care of the goblin scouts?" asked him the NPC, around whom the system continued to glow with the notification that the team had received a quest. Thus, the system has already offered them a new mission, namely to eliminate goblin scouts in Somer Canyon. Thanks to the fact that the archer had just been bailed out, he said he would certainly look into the matter, to which the new character thanked him profusely. The only thing our hero didn't like was that it would take 30 minutes to get there and back. It's a little annoying, but that's okay. After that, he decides to log into his system for a second to see if Yuhain, who was online at the time, is online. He was very lucky because he decided to go into correspondence with him, because he asked to accept his request to join the guild, after which they had a dialogue. "What? A request to join? You're already level 20? Yeah, I just got it. Wow, it's true, you're a monster. I accepted your request. Dude, how did you get to level 20 so fast? I've heard that even the dark wizards, who are known for their speed, never made it to the 20th level." To which our master replies, "Have you forgotten who you're talking to? I'll catch up with you shortly, so get ready." "Yeah, okay, hurry up. It's tough without you." Well, their dialogue didn't end there, and Ian decided to ask who in our guild is about level 40, The Hyun was very surprised, saying that there's no one yet, and asked what he wanted. "Come on, no big deal, I'll figure it out myself," the archer replied and left. He decides to look in the guild chat room, because it's better to find a guild helper than to look for some other character. That's why he goes into the chat room and tells the team that he's back and asks how the guys are doing. The team immediately greets him and wonders how he's already reached level 20. Another person also asked, isn't leveling up for a summoner awfully slow, or was that nonsense? To which our hero, with particular enthusiasm, answers his friends that this is only level 20th, nothing special, and soon he plans to return to his original level on what the team. He was very much supported, because without him, they are very, very hard. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the guy also asked the guild if anyone was level 40. But Hyun couldn't understand why he was looking for a level 40 begging sign. Here our archer had a rather interesting idea that amused him a bit, because he wondered, would everyone be shocked if he told them about the quests with goblins at level 20? That's why, without wasting a second, he simply continued that he plans to do the quest of clearing the goblin camp. But it's a group assignment. That's why he's looking for one more person to stand up for himself in the camp. Although, without thinking long, he said that he needed absolutely anyone, because he can cope completely alone. To which his team just had the utmost surprise, and they decided to clarify. Doesn't he have level 20? How is he going to do the quest with the goblins' camp? And say he can do it by himself? Another person from their guild also joined in the dialogue, and began to criticize the hero. Allegedly, he travels only at the expense of other players. There was a conflict in the guild. Some were in favor of the idea, while others were against it. But Ian, like a true leader, replied that he has a very strong pet, so he thinks he can do the quest on his own. Or rather, he bets all on his pet. Dude, looks like good luck is on your side. He starts smiling and getting a little embarrassed, at which point another person also added to the dialogue and said that now it's clear how he got level 20 so quickly. But the one who first criticized him said he had a friend of about level 45, which made the archer very happy and asked them to meet. But Carvin tweaked it a little, saying that the thing is that she has a production class, so her fighting abilities are a little off. But that didn't bother him, and he just asked what her class was, and it turns out she was just a cook. This, of course, surprised our character quite a bit, and he decided to ask again, is she really a cook? To which he received a positive response, although he understands that it is unlikely she will be useful in battle. But if he does not mind, she can go with him. Of course, he was all for it, and simply asked him to write her when she was in the game, to which his companion decided to ask again if he was sure. After all, he just needed someone to just start this quest. He absolutely does not care what the skills will be. That's why he answered affirmatively that yes, he is ready. After that, he said he still has a lot of work and left the chat room, saying that he likes to correspond, but not so much. Feeling confident in his abilities and again the desire to do something, he decides that it is necessary to deal with the previous quest before Carvin wrote him. Meanwhile, the weather in the woods is very nice. There's even a waterfall and a river. Suddenly, the master takes a closer look and sees a flock of leopards. It turns out that it was a level 30th monster, though it looked very cool and quite harmless. As suddenly, in his mind, he looked at him again and convinced himself of that. At that moment, the wolf took another step on the ground and decided just to turn around and walk away from the master, to which he reacted very strangely and very much hoped that he could not read his mind, right? It was obvious that the wolf was really offended by him, after which the archer went up to him and told him that he was really very dear to him, specifying whether the wolf himself knows about it, to which he simply closed his eyes and made a quiet threat. After that, the archer had no desire to do anything further. He was just as very upset. It was obvious that he was very ashamed of his act, and it was unclear how to redeem himself. As suddenly the wolf began to glow with blue flame, smoke formed around him. He began to growl, and the archer absolutely did not understand what was happening to him. He was in a panic and tried to figure out what was going on after all. and turned to his system for help. But all to no avail, when suddenly he realized something. And was it really so? Suddenly, the wolf's eyes turned demonic red, and a red lightning formed around him, which seemed to communicate that something unpleasant was going on. Turns out it was evolution. Finally, he was evolving. Jan was very happy because finally his friend was starting to become even cooler and even stronger, and he had a smile of happiness in his eyes. But he still couldn't understand why he was evolving now. What was even the requirement for evolution? At this time, the process continues, and the wolf is no longer even visible, all in a blue and white glare. It finally happened. The archer was immensely happy, because finally his potential reached 100. I wonder if his appearance would change if he evolved? At this point, the archer began to fantasize that it would be very cool if his wolf got bigger. That way he could already eat on it. At that moment, the wolf began to appear before him, already in a red form. And the explosion and flash from the evolution was visible throughout the forest, all the way up to the sky. The wolf visibly changed and began to growl, from which our hero was only glad, because now his friend, to whom, of course, he was guilty, transformed in front of him in a completely new image. He was very strong and beautiful, and evolved into a wolf with a blood-red mane. Then came the system which reported that the mastery of the ability medium training increased as a result of the evolution of the pet, and also increased its glory by 15 due to the fact that his pet for the first time successfully evolved. He was very happy and could not contain his emotions with happiness, praising his wolf. He went up to him, stroked him, and complimented him, saying he loved him very much. I hope the wolf has already forgotten what happened 10 minutes ago. Then the system opened his statistics and reported that he has a unique ability, vampirism, which takes 15% of damage to enemies, and, on a critical hit, it rises to 50%. Moreover, now the wolf with a red mane has a more aggressive temperament. After that, the archer approached him and noticed that the discharge had changed from normal to rare, which meant that the wolf could still evolve. But if he does it again, will his discharge once again change to unique? The question is quite interesting, so be sure to subscribe to find out more.